Ex stole my dog after we broke up. Said you'll never see him again. I tracked his location, broke in, and took my dog back while he was on vacation, then left a note saying nice try. I don't know if anyone will believe this, but I have to tell this story somewhere. I need to get it out, and honestly, I just want someone to hear me. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I can't regret it either. 6 months ago, my life turned upside down, and it all started with my ex, Callum. We'd been together for about a year and a half, and for the first year, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Callum was charming, always knew the right things to say, and seemed like he really had his life together. But the longer we were together, the more I realized that everything had to revolve around him. He needed constant attention, constant validation, and if he didn't get it, he'd sulk or start fights. But the one thing that got me through all of that was my dog, Bandit. He's a border collie mix with this black and white coat that makes him look like a little cow sometimes. I adopted him from a shelter in Indianapolis 5 years ago, and since then, he's been my everything. If you've ever had a dog, you know what I mean, they're not just pets, they're family. Bandit was my hiking buddy, my Netflix companion, and honestly, the one thing in my life that made me feel grounded when things got rough. Callum tolerated Bandit at best. He'd pat him on the head once in a while or toss him a treat, but you could tell he didn't really care about him. He'd even make comments like, "You treat that dog better than me?" or "Why do you waste so much money on him?" Looking back, I guess those were red flags, but at the time, I brushed them off. I thought, maybe he's just not a dog person. Anyway, the real trouble started when I found out Callum had been cheating on me. A friend of mine saw him out with another guy in Indianapolis, holding hands and acting like they didn't have a care in the world. When I confronted him about it, he didn't even try to deny it. He just shrugged and said, "You've been distant lately. What did you expect?" That was his excuse. Like somehow, me working late a few nights a week was an invitation for him to start seeing someone else. I told him to pack his things and leave. It wasn't some big dramatic breakup, I was too exhausted for that. He left, and I thought that was the end of it. For the first time in months, I actually felt like I could breathe. But then, a week later, I came home from work to find Bandit gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd left the gate open, or maybe Bandit had somehow gotten out. I ran all over the neighborhood calling his name. My neighbors joined in, and we searched for hours. But as the sun went down, I went back inside to grab my phone and call animal control, and that's when I saw it, a note on the counter in Callum's handwriting. It said, "You don't deserve him. You'll never see him again." I can't even describe the feeling that hit me when I read those words. It was like my whole body went numb, and then I just broke. I called him over and over, but he didn't answer. I sent texts, begging him to bring Bandit back. Nothing. He'd blocked me on everything. The police were no help. I went down to the station the next morning with all the paperwork I had on Bandit, but since Callum had lived with me, they said it was a civil matter. They basically told me I needed to take it to small claims court if I wanted to pursue it. I tried explaining that Bandit wasn't just some piece of furniture or a shared asset. He was my dog, my family. But it didn't matter. For weeks, I was a wreck. I barely slept. I put up flyers all over town, posted on every lost pet page I could find, and even hired a pet detective. Yeah, those are real, and if you're wondering, they cost a small fortune. But I didn't care. I was willing to do anything to get Bandit back. Still, it was like he'd disappeared without a trace. Then, about a month after Bandit was taken, I got a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a picture of Bandit lying on a couch I didn't recognize. He looked okay, his tail was wagging, and he didn't seem scared, but seeing him like that, knowing he wasn't with me, ripped me apart. The caption under the picture said, "He's better off without you." It was Callum. I knew it was him. But he didn't say anything else, and the number he texted from wasn't accepting calls. I sat there staring at that picture for hours, trying to figure out what to do. And then I noticed something in the background of the photo. There was a window behind the couch, and outside the window, I could see a street sign. It was blurry, but I could just make out the word Lakeview. That was my first clue. I spent hours on Google Maps, searching for every Lakeview street in Indiana. There were more than I expected, but one of them caught my eye. It was in a tiny lakeside town about 2 hours away from where I live. I don't know why, but I had a feeling that was the one. The next morning, I called in sick to work, got in my car, and drove to that town. When I got to Lakeview Street, I parked at the end of the block and started walking. I must have looked like a lunatic, wandering up and down the street, staring at houses. But then I heard it, Bandit's bark. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I followed the sound and ended up in front of a small, run-down house with a chain-link fence. And there he was. Bandit. He was in the backyard, wagging his tail like crazy when he saw me. I wanted to run to him, to scoop him up and take him home right then and there, but I couldn't. The house looked empty, but I didn't know for sure, and there was a neighbor a few doors down watching me like a hawk. I needed a plan. I went back to my car and sat there for hours, just watching the house. By the end of the day, I was almost certain no one was home. There was no car in the driveway, no lights on, and I noticed a couple of packages sitting on the porch that hadn't been picked up. Callum was gone, probably off on one of his vacations. That's when I decided I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going to get my dog back, no matter what it took. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through my plan in my head, trying to think of every possible thing that could go wrong. But the truth was, I didn't care anymore. I'd waited long enough, played by the rules long enough. Bandit was mine, and I was getting him back. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I parked a few streets away and walked over. I had brought a few tools with me, nothing fancy, just a screwdriver, a flashlight, and some gloves. My heart was racing as I went around to the backyard. The chain-link fence was easy to climb, but I was careful not to make any noise. Bandit saw me right away, and his whole body started wagging with excitement. I put my finger to my lips to quiet him down, and he actually listened. Smart dog. I tested the back door. Locked, of course. But the window next to it had an old screen that was loose at the corner. I slid it off, jimmied the window open with my screwdriver, and climbed inside. The house smelled musty, like it hadn't been lived in for a while. Callum really was gone. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed Bandit's leash, which was hanging by the door, clipped it onto his collar, and started to leave. But as I turned to go, something caught my eye, a framed picture of Callum on the mantel. He was holding Bandit, smiling like he hadn't just ripped my heart out. Something about it made my blood boil. I walked over, grabbed the picture, and shoved it in my bag. Petty? Maybe. But I didn't care. Before I left, I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a note. I taped it to the fridge where I knew Callum would see it. It said, "Nice try. You lose." I climbed back out the window with Bandit, and we were out of there. As soon as we got to the car, I hugged him so tight he licked my face until I started laughing. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The fallout was glorious. A few days later, Callum started blowing up my phone from random numbers, leaving voicemails full of threats and insults. He said I was a thief, that he was going to call the cops, that I'd regret this. But I wasn't worried. You see, I'd already covered my bases. When Bandit was a puppy, I had him microchipped. His chip was registered to me, with my name, my address, everything. I even updated the registration the day after I got him back, just in case Callum tried anything. And he did. He called the police, but when they checked the microchip records, it was clear Bandit was mine. The cops didn't care about some note on the fridge or a window screen that wasn't even broken. They told him it was a civil matter, the same way they'd told me months ago. But Callum didn't stop there. He went on a full-blown social media rampage, posting about how I was a criminal and a dog kidnapper. He tagged me in every post, thinking it would embarrass me. Instead, it backfired. See, I still had that picture he'd sent me of Bandit on the couch. I posted it, along with screenshots of his note where he said, "You'll never see him again." People turned on him instantly. His friends, his family, everyone saw what a manipulative jerk he was. He ended up deleting his accounts a week later. But the best part? I still had that picture I'd taken from his house. I printed out copies and mailed them to him with little notes that said, "Remember who's smarter." Every few weeks, I'd send another one. I never used a return address, but I know he got them. It was petty, sure, but after everything he'd put me through, it felt like justice. Now, Bandit and I are back home, and life is finally normal again. I've updated all his records, got him a GPS collar, and even installed cameras around my house just in case Callum ever gets any bright ideas. I don't think he will, though. Last I heard, he moved out of state. Good riddance. People keep asking me if I feel bad about what I did. The truth? Not one bit. Callum messed with the wrong person, and he learned the hard way that you don't mess with someone's dog. Bandit's happy, healthy, and back where he belongs. That's all that matters to me. And as for Callum? Well, let's just say karma caught up with him, and I made sure it hit hard.